Marcus Thompson had always been different from other kids in his small Texas town. While his classmates played football and basketball, he spent hours behind his grandfather's farmhouse, perfecting his aim with an old hunting rifle. His grandfather, a World War II veteran, had taught him that shooting was more than just pulling a trigger. It was about patience, breathing, and understanding the wind. By age 16, Marcus could hit a tin can from 300 yards away. His friends called him a show-off, but his grandfather knew better. The old man saw something special in his grandson's steady hands and calm focus. He would often tell Marcus stories about the war, about how one good shot could change everything. When Marcus turned 18, he knew exactly what he wanted to do with his life. He wanted to serve his country as a military sniper. His test scores were excellent, his physical fitness was outstanding, and his shooting skills were far beyond average. He walked into the Army recruitment office with confidence, certain that his future was about to begin. The recruitment sergeant, a tough-looking man named Rodriguez, looked over Marcus's application. Everything seemed perfect until he reached the medical section. Marcus had been honest about his childhood asthma, even though he hadn't had an attack in over 5 years. He thought his honesty would be appreciated. Sergeant Rodriguez frowned and shook his head. "Son, I'm sorry, but medical regulations are clear. History of asthma means automatic disqualification for combat roles. We can offer you a support position, maybe in communications or logistics." Marcus felt his world crashing down. He tried to explain that his asthma was mild, that he ran 5 miles every morning without any problems, that he could outshoot anyone in the county. But regulations were regulations. The military had strict rules for good reasons, and they couldn't make exceptions. "But sir," Marcus pleaded, "I've been preparing for this my whole life. My grandfather served with honor, and I want to follow in his footsteps. I can do this job better than anyone." Rodriguez's expression softened slightly. He could see the genuine pain in the young man's eyes. "Look, kid, I believe you're tough enough, but the military has seen too many soldiers get into trouble when their medical conditions act up in the field. We can't risk it. Take the communications job. It's important work, and you'll still be serving your country." Marcus left the recruitment office feeling defeated and angry. He had dreamed of being a soldier since childhood, and now those dreams were shattered by a medical condition that barely affected him anymore. He drove home slowly, dreading having to tell his grandfather the bad news. His grandfather was waiting on the front porch, as if he knew something was wrong. Marcus explained what had happened, expecting disappointment. Instead, his grandfather nodded thoughtfully and said, "Sometimes life takes us on different paths than we planned. That doesn't mean we give up on our dreams, it just means we find another way to reach them." For the next few months, Marcus threw himself into civilian life, with bitter resignation. He took a job at the local hardware store and spent his evenings at the shooting range, keeping his skills sharp even though he saw no point in it anymore. His friends tried to cheer him up, but nothing seemed to work. The shooting range owner, an ex-Marine named Bill Jackson, noticed Marcus's exceptional skills and his obvious frustration. One evening, after watching Marcus put 20 consecutive shots through the same hole at 200 yards, Bill approached him with an idea. "Son, have you ever heard of competitive shooting?" Bill asked. "There are civilian organizations that work with law enforcement and sometimes military units. They need skilled marksmen for special situations. It's not the same as being a soldier, but it might be a way to use your talents for something important." Marcus wasn't immediately interested. Competitive shooting seemed like playing games compared to real military service. But Bill persisted, explaining that civilian marksmen sometimes assisted in rescue operations, hostage situations, and disaster relief efforts. It wasn't combat, but it was still serving others. Reluctantly, Marcus agreed to attend a civilian tactical shooting competition. He told himself he was just going through the motions. But as soon as he picked up the rifle, his competitive nature took over. The course was challenging, requiring long-distance precision shooting under time pressure. Marcus dominated the competition, finishing with a perfect score that impressed even the most experienced shooters. Word of his performance spread quickly through the tight-knit community of competitive marksmen. Within weeks, He was receiving invitations to more advanced competitions and training programs. One invitation came from a federal law enforcement training facility. They were looking for civilian instructors who could help train agents in advanced marksmanship. Marcus hesitated, still feeling bitter about his military rejection, but his grandfather encouraged him to consider it. Sometimes God closes one door to open another, his grandfather said. Maybe this is your path to serving others. Marcus accepted the position and found himself working alongside federal agents, teaching them the same skills his grandfather had taught him. The work was satisfying, but he still felt like he was settling for second best. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant for something more important. His life took an unexpected turn when he met Agent Sarah Chen, a young FBI negotiator who attended one of his marksmanship courses. She was impressed by his teaching ability and his obvious expertise. But she was even more impressed by his character. Marcus was patient with struggling students, generous with his knowledge, and completely dedicated to helping others improve. Over coffee after a training session, Sarah told Marcus about the FBI's crisis response team. It was a specialized unit that handled high-risk situations across the country. They sometimes needed civilian experts for particularly challenging cases, especially those requiring extreme long-distance shooting skills. Have you ever considered federal law enforcement? Sarah asked. Your military rejection doesn't matter here. We care about skills and character. And you have both in abundance. Marcus felt a spark of interest he hadn't experienced since his military rejection. This wasn't exactly the path he had planned, but it was a chance to use his abilities in service of others. It was a chance to make a difference in situations where lives hung in the balance. The application process for the crisis response team was even more demanding than military recruitment. Marcus had to pass extensive background checks, psychological evaluations, and physical fitness tests. His asthma was noted but not considered disqualifying for the civilian consultant position he was seeking. The final test was a shooting evaluation that pushed Marcus's skills to their absolute limit. He had to make precise shots at distances exceeding anything he had ever attempted. Under simulated stress conditions that tested both his technical ability and his mental composure, Marcus passed every test with exceptional scores. 6 months after his military rejection, he found himself wearing a federal consultant badge and preparing for his first real mission. It wasn't the military career he had dreamed of, but it was something equally important. He was finally going to serve others in a meaningful way. Using the gifts his grandfather had helped him develop, Marcus had been with the crisis response team for 8 months when the call came. He was at home, cleaning his grandfather's old rifle and thinking about their upcoming weekend fishing trip, when his phone buzzed with the emergency alert tone. The message was brief but urgent. Hostage situation developing. Report to airfield immediately. Code red response. Within 30 minutes, Marcus was aboard a federal helicopter heading toward the Colorado mountains. Agent Sarah Chen briefed him during the flight, shouting over the rotor noise. A group of armed militants had taken over a remote mountain research facility that studied climate change. 23 scientists and support staff were trapped inside, and the situation was escalating rapidly. The facility is built into the mountainside, Sarah explained, showing Marcus aerial photographs. Only one access road, completely surrounded by cliffs. The militants have heavy weapons and excellent defensive positions. They're demanding the release of their leader from federal prison, and they've already threatened to start killing hostages if their demands aren't met. Marcus studied the photos carefully, noting the challenging terrain and the limited approach routes. The facility was essentially a fortress, perched on a narrow ledge with sheer drops on 3 sides. Any ground assault would be extremely dangerous for both the hostages and the rescue team. What's their timeline? Marcus asked. They've given us 12 hours, Sarah replied grimly. But intelligence suggests they're unstable and might not wait that long. We need to be ready for anything. The helicopter landed at a temporary command post established in a valley below the facility. Marcus could see the building through his binoculars. A modern structure that seemed to grow out of the rock face itself. Smoke was rising from one section, suggesting the militants had already caused some damage. FBI Tactical Commander Jake Morrison met them at the landing zone. Morrison was a veteran of dozens of hostage situations, but Marcus could see the stress in his weathered face. This wasn't going to be a standard operation. The good news is, we've established communication with the hostages, Morrison explained as they walked toward the command trailer. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the facility director, managed to get a cell phone signal from inside. She's been giving us updates on the situation. Marcus listened as Morrison outlined what they knew. 8 militants had stormed the facility at dawn, overwhelming the minimal security force. They were well armed and clearly knew the layout of the building. The hostages were being held in the main conference room, which had reinforced walls but also large windows facing the valley. The bad news, Morrison continued, is that our usual tactical options are extremely limited. The access road is completely exposed and heavily defended. Any helicopter approach is too risky because of the mountain winds and the militants' weapons. We're essentially looking at a siege situation. Marcus examined the tactical maps spread across the command table. The facility was indeed in an almost impossible position to assault, but as he studied the terrain, he began to notice something that others might have missed. There was a rock formation across the valley, nearly a mile away, that offered a clear line of sight to the facility's windows. "What's the maximum range you've seen confirmed hits at?" Morrison asked, following Marcus's gaze. "In training, I've made clean shots at 1,600 yards, Marcus replied honestly. But this would be different. Mountain winds, elevation changes, stress factors, and I'd need to be absolutely certain of my targets. Sarah pulled out a laptop and connected to the facility's internal security cameras. The militants had damaged some of the system, but several cameras in the conference room were still functioning. The hostages were clearly visible, sitting on the floor with their hands zip-tied behind their backs. The militants moved around them nervously, automatic weapons always ready. "Dr. Walsh says the leader is becoming increasingly agitated," Morrison reported after taking another call. "He's talking about making examples of the hostages to show they're serious." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't a training exercise or a competition. Real lives were at stake, and the margin for error was zero. One mistake could result in innocent deaths. "I need to see that shooting position," Marcus said. "And I need to understand the wind patterns at this altitude." The team moved quickly to establish Marcus's position on the rocky outcrop across the valley. The climb took nearly 2 hours, carrying his specialized rifle system and spotting equipment. Marcus's spotter was Agent Tom Bradley, a former Marine scout who had trained extensively in long-distance observation. From their position, Marcus could clearly see the conference room windows through his scope. The distance was exactly 1,547 yards, according to his laser rangefinder. The altitude difference between their position and the target was significant, requiring careful calculation of bullet trajectory. Mountain winds were shifting constantly, making precise shots even more challenging. "Wind is coming from the northwest at 8 to 12 miles per hour, but it's gusty," Bradley reported through his spotting scope. "Elevation difference is putting us about 200 feet above the target." Marcus made careful adjustments to his rifle scope, accounting for the distance, elevation, and wind conditions. He had practiced these calculations thousands of times, but never under these circumstances. The weight of responsibility was almost overwhelming. Through his scope, Marcus could see the hostages clearly. They were mostly young people, graduate students and researchers who had dedicated their lives to understanding climate change. Some looked terrified. Others appeared to be trying to comfort their colleagues. Dr. Walsh, a woman in her 50s with graying hair, sat near the center of the group, occasionally speaking quietly to those around her. The militants were harder to track through the scope because they kept moving. Marcus counted at least 6 in the conference room, with others presumably stationed throughout the facility. They were dressed in military-style clothing and carried assault rifles with apparent familiarity. "Command, this is Overwatch," Bradley spoke into his radio, using Marcus's designation. "We have clear visual on the conference room, counting 6 hostiles in immediate vicinity of hostages. Recommend maintaining position and monitoring situation." Hours passed slowly as negotiations continued below. Marcus maintained his position behind the rifle, occasionally adjusting for changes in wind or lighting conditions. His training had taught him patience, but the emotional stress of watching innocent people in danger was exhausting. As afternoon turned to evening, the situation inside the facility began to deteriorate. Dr. Walsh's phone calls became more urgent, reporting that the militant leader was becoming increasingly unstable. He had begun singling out individual hostages, making threats about what would happen if his demands weren't met. "He's chosen 3 people," Morrison's voice crackled through the radio. "Says he'll execute them one at a time, starting in 1 hour. To prove he's serious." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. This was exactly what they had feared. The situation was moving beyond negotiation toward violence, and time was running out for a peaceful resolution. Through his scope, Marcus watched as the militants separated 3 hostages from the main group. 2 young men and a woman, all appearing to be in their 20s, were forced to kneel facing the windows. The militant leader stood behind them, weapon raised, clearly visible through Marcus's crosshairs. "I have a clear shot on the primary target," Marcus reported, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "Range is confirmed at 1,547 yards. Wind conditions are stable for the moment," but Morrison's response was cautious. "Hold position, Overwatch. We're still trying to negotiate. Taking the shot now might trigger a massacre of the remaining hostages." Marcus understood the logic, but watching innocent people prepare to die, while he had the ability to stop it, was the hardest thing he had ever experienced. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. "Sometimes one good shot can change everything." The tension in Marcus's position was unbearable, as they waited for either a breakthrough in negotiations or the order to take action. Through his scope, he could see the fear in the hostages' faces, and he knew that their lives might soon depend entirely on his skill and judgment. The deadline was approaching fast. Marcus had been in position for over 6 hours, his body cramped from maintaining the same shooting stance, but his focus never wavered. Through his scope, he watched as the militant leader paced behind the 3 kneeling hostages, clearly preparing to follow through on his threat. "Negotiations have broken down." Morrison's voice came through the radio with grim finality. "The subject is refusing all compromise offers. He's demanding proof that we're releasing his people from prison, but we can't do that without congressional approval." "Time's almost up." "Time's." Agent Bradley, lying beside Marcus with the spotting scope, provided continuous updates on wind conditions and target movement. "Wind is steady now, 6 to 8 miles per hour from the northwest. Primary target is stationary, approximately 15 feet behind the hostages." Marcus had calculated and recalculated his shot dozens of times. At 1,547 yards, even with perfect conditions, the bullet would take nearly 2 seconds to reach its target. In that time, wind could shift, the target could move, or any number of variables could affect the outcome. But he was as ready as any human could be. Through his earpiece, Marcus heard Dr. Walsh's voice during her latest check-in call. She was trying to sound calm, but the fear was evident. "He's getting more agitated. He keeps looking at his watch and talking about sending a message. The 3 hostages he selected are terrified. One of them is crying." Marcus felt a surge of protective anger. These people had done nothing wrong. They were scientists trying to help the world understand climate change, and now they were facing execution because of the twisted ideology of armed militants. His grandfather had taught him that a sniper's greatest responsibility was protecting the innocent. "Overwatch, what's your assessment?" Morrison asked through the radio. Marcus took a deep breath before responding. His voice was steady and professional, despite the enormous pressure. "I have a clear shot on the primary target. Conditions are as good as they're going to get, but I need to know about backup plans if this goes wrong. Tactical teams are positioned at the access road, but they can't move in time to prevent executions if your shot doesn't neutralize the threat," Morrison replied honestly. "This is likely our only chance to save those 3 hostages." The weight of that statement settled on Marcus's shoulders like a physical burden. 23 lives were depending on his skill, but 3 lives were depending on it immediately. There would be no second chances, no time to adjust and try again. Movement in the conference room, Bradley reported urgently. Primary target is raising his weapon. Looks like he's preparing to follow through. Through his scope, Marcus could see the militant leader pointing his rifle at the back of the first hostage's head. The young man was shaking visibly, his shoulders moving with what appeared to be sobs. The other hostages in the room were looking away, unable to watch what was about to happen. Overwatch, you are cleared to engage. Morrison's voice came through with quiet authority. Take the shot. Marcus felt time slow down as his training took over. His breathing became deep and controlled. His heart rate actually decreased despite the stress. This was what he had been preparing for his entire life, even when he didn't know it. His grandfather's lessons, years of practice, months of federal training, everything had led to this moment. He adjusted his scope one final time, accounting for the wind that Bradley was reading. The crosshairs settled on the militant leader's center mass. A headshot would be more immediately incapacitating, but at this range, with these conditions, center mass was the reliable choice. Wind steady at 7 miles per hour, northwest, Bradley whispered. Target is stationary. You have the shot. Marcus's finger moved to the trigger with deliberate precision. His breathing stopped at the natural respiratory pause, his body completely still. The crosshairs were perfectly aligned. This was the shot that would either save 3 lives immediately, and potentially all 23, or it would trigger a massacre. The rifle fired with a thunderous crack that echoed across the valley. Marcus maintained his sight picture, tracking the bullet's path through his scope. For what seemed like an eternity but was actually less than 2 seconds, everything hung in balance. The bullet struck the militant leader in the chest with devastating accuracy. The impact threw him backward, his weapon flying from his hands as he collapsed to the floor. The effect on the room was immediate and chaotic. Target down! Bradley shouted. Primary target is down. The other militants in the room reacted with shock and confusion. Some rushed to their fallen leader, while others looked frantically around, trying to understand where the shot had come from. The hostages remained on the floor, too terrified to move. Marcus immediately began tracking the other militants through his scope, ready to take follow-up shots if necessary. His position was well concealed, and the sound of the gunshot could have come from any direction in the mountainous terrain. The militants had no idea where the threat was located. This is Dr. Walsh, came the urgent voice through the radio. The leader is down, but the others are panicking. They're arguing about what to do. Some want to surrender, but others are talking about fighting it out. Morrison's voice cut through the communications with clear commands. All units, prepare for tactical entry. Overwatch. Maintain position and provide cover for our teams. Marcus watched through his scope as confusion spread among the remaining militants. Without their leader, they seemed to have lost their sense of purpose and direction. Some were trying to render aid to the fallen man, while others were positioning themselves defensively around the room. The 3 hostages who had been selected for execution were still kneeling, but they were no longer in immediate danger. The militants were too focused on their own crisis to pay attention to carrying out their leader's threats. I have clear shots on 3 additional targets, Marcus reported calmly, awaiting orders. But the situation was evolving rapidly. Dr. Walsh's next call brought unexpected news. Several of the militants are talking about surrendering. They're scared and confused without their leader. They never expected resistance like this. Agent Bradley continued providing tactical updates. I count 4 militants still active in the conference room. 2 more visible in the hallway outside. They appear to be consolidating their positions but not presenting immediate threats to hostages. Marcus kept his rifle trained on the conference room, ready to take additional shots if any of the militants threatened the hostages. But his successful elimination of the leader had changed the entire dynamic of the situation. What had been a confident group of ideological extremists had become a confused and frightened collection of individuals facing the reality of their situation. The next few minutes would determine whether Marcus's shot had been the beginning of a peaceful resolution or merely the opening move in a larger battle. But for now, 3 innocent people were alive who might have been dead. And that alone made every hour of training and preparation worthwhile. Through his scope, Marcus could see the hostages beginning to look up, hopefully for the first time all day. They didn't understand exactly what had happened, but they could sense that something fundamental had changed. The immediate threat to their lives had been eliminated by a shot fired from nearly a mile away, by a man they would never meet, but who had dedicated his life to protecting people just like them. The immediate aftermath of Marcus's shot created a window of opportunity that the tactical teams had been waiting for all day. With the militant leader eliminated and his followers in disarray, Commander Morrison ordered the coordinated assault to begin. "All units, move in now," Morrison commanded through the radio. "Overwatch. Maintain position and provide cover fire as needed." Marcus watched through his scope as tactical teams began their approach from multiple angles. Helicopters that had been holding at safe distances moved closer to the facility, while ground teams advanced up the access road under cover of smoke grenades. The entire operation had to be executed quickly before the remaining militants could reorganize. Through the conference room windows, Marcus could see the chaos unfolding inside. The remaining militants were shouting at each other, some pointing toward the windows while others gathered around their fallen leader. Two of them appeared to be arguing intensely about what to do next. "This is Dr. Walsh," came the familiar voice through the radio, but now speaking more quietly. "The militants are completely confused. 3 of them are talking about surrendering, but 2 others want to fight. They can't agree on anything without their leader." Agent Bradley provided continuous tactical updates from his spotting position. "I count 5 militants still mobile in the conference room, 2 more in the hallway. The hostages are staying down, but they seem to understand something is happening." Marcus kept his crosshairs moving between potential targets, ready to eliminate any threat to the innocent people below. His first shot had been perfect, but the situation remained dangerous. Cornered extremists could become even more unpredictable and violent. The first breakthrough came when 2 helicopters approached the facility's roof simultaneously. Tactical officers fast roped down while Marcus provided overwatch, ready to take shots if any militants appeared to threaten the landing teams. The militants inside the building could hear the helicopters but couldn't see exactly where the teams were landing. "Roof teams in position," reported the tactical leader, "beginning entry from above." At the same time, ground teams reached the main entrance of the facility. Marcus watched through his scope as explosive charges blew the reinforced doors, filling the building's corridors with smoke and confusion. The coordinated assault was happening exactly as planned. Inside the conference room, the remaining militants were becoming increasingly panicked. Marcus could see 2 of them dragging their leader's body toward what appeared to be a back exit, while others tried to use hostages as human shields. This was exactly the scenario everyone had feared. "Hostiles are moving hostages," Marcus reported urgently. 2 militants at the east window are using civilians as cover." Through his scope, Marcus could see one of the militants holding a young female scientist in front of him while pointing his weapon at other hostages. The man was shouting something, probably threats, but Marcus couldn't hear the words from his distant position. "Take the shot, if you have it," Morrison authorized immediately. "We cannot let them use hostages as shields." This shot would be even more challenging than the first. The militant was partially concealed behind his hostage, presenting only a small target area. Marcus would have to be absolutely precise to avoid hitting the innocent person. At nearly 1,600 yards with a moving target, the margin for error was virtually 0. Marcus steadied his breathing and focused his attention entirely on the shot. Through his scope, he could see the militant's left shoulder and part of his head exposed beside the hostage. It wasn't much of a target, but it was enough for someone with Marcus's skills. "I have a partial shot on hostile using human shield," Marcus reported. "Target is moving, but I can take him." "Cleared to engage," Morrison responded without hesitation. Marcus waited for the perfect moment when the militant shifted position, exposing more of his torso. The shot had to be instant and perfect. The female hostage would be sprayed with blood and probably traumatized, but she would be alive. The rifle cracked again, sending the second precisely aimed bullet across the valley. Marcus watched through his scope as the bullet found its mark, striking the militant in the shoulder and spinning him away from his hostage. The woman collapsed to the floor, alive but clearly shocked by the sudden violence. Second target down, Bradley confirmed. Hostile eliminated. Hostage appears uninjured. The effect of Marcus's second shot was even more dramatic than the first. The remaining militants finally understood that they were being targeted by a sniper they couldn't locate or fight back against. Their sense of control over the situation completely collapsed. Dr. Walsh's voice came through the radio with barely controlled excitement. 3 of them just dropped their weapons. They're putting their hands up and backing away from the hostages. Marcus continued scanning through his scope, looking for any remaining threats. He could see tactical officers beginning to enter the conference room from multiple access points, their movements coordinated and professional. The surrendering militants were quickly secured with zip tie restraints. "This is Tactical 1, came a new voice over the radio. "Conference room is secure. We have 5 militants in custody. 2 down. Beginning hostage evacuation now." Through his scope, Marcus watched as the nightmare finally ended for the 23 innocent people who had been terrorized all day. Tactical officers were cutting the zip ties from their wrists and helping them to their feet. Medical teams were moving in to check for injuries. Dr. Walsh was among the first hostages to be freed. Marcus could see her through his scope as she stood up slowly. Rubbing her wrists where the restraints had cut into her skin, she was looking around the room with a mixture of relief and disbelief, as if she couldn't quite accept that the ordeal was really over. "All hostages are alive and accounted for," reported the tactical team leader. "We have minor injuries from restraints and stress, but no serious medical emergencies. The facility is secure." Marcus finally allowed himself to relax slightly, though he maintained his position in case there were additional threats elsewhere in the building. His 2 shots had eliminated the most dangerous militants and created the opening necessary for a successful rescue operation. Agent Bradley was grinning as he looked through his spotting scope. "Outstanding shooting. 2 targets at over 1,500 yards. Both perfect hits under extreme stress. I've never seen anything like it." But Marcus felt no sense of celebration. He had taken 2 lives today, even though they were the lives of people who were threatening innocent civilians. His grandfather had taught him that taking a life, even in defense of others, was always a serious responsibility that should be approached with solemnity. "Overwatch. Excellent work," Morrison's voice came through the radio. "Your shots saved lives today and made this rescue possible. Begin your withdrawal when ready." As tactical teams continued securing the facility and caring for the freed hostages, Marcus began the process of packing up his equipment. The specialized rifle would be thoroughly cleaned and inspected, then returned to the federal armory. Every aspect of today's operation would be documented and reviewed. The descent from their shooting position took nearly an hour, carrying the heavy equipment down the rocky mountainside. By the time Marcus and Bradley reached the command post, the first helicopters were already evacuating the most traumatized hostages to medical facilities. Marcus could see Dr. Walsh among a group of survivors who were being interviewed by federal agents. Even from a distance, he could see that she was shaken but strong, answering questions clearly and helping to provide information about what had happened inside the facility. Later that evening, as the crisis officially ended and the command post was being dismantled, Agent Sarah Chen found Marcus sitting alone, cleaning his grandfather's old rifle that he had brought as a backup weapon. "You know those people are alive because of you," she said quietly, sitting down beside him. 23 people are going home to their families tonight because you were willing to take those shots." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, but his expression remained serious. "My grandfather always said that with great skill comes great responsibility. Today I learned what he really meant by that." 3 months after the mountain facility rescue, Marcus was back home in Texas, helping his grandfather repair fence posts on their family ranch. The old man moved more slowly now, but his mind remained sharp, and his aim with a hammer was still true. They worked together in comfortable silence, the way they had since Marcus was a child. The media attention following the rescue operation had been intense but brief. The FBI had initially kept Marcus's identity classified for security reasons, referring to him only as a federal consultant in their press releases. The dramatic story of 23 lives saved by precise long-distance shooting had captured public imagination, but Marcus preferred to stay out of the spotlight. His grandfather understood this instinctively. "Real heroes don't need their names in the papers," he had said. "They just need to know they did right when it mattered." But the federal government had not forgotten Marcus's contribution. Agent Sarah Chen had called him several times with updates on the investigation and to check on his well-being. The psychological evaluation following the operation had confirmed what everyone already knew. Marcus was handling the stress of having taken 2 lives remarkably well, largely because of his strong moral foundation and clear understanding of why his actions had been necessary. On this particular afternoon, as they finished repairing the last section of fence, Marcus noticed a familiar vehicle approaching down their long gravel driveway. Agent Chen's government sedan raised a cloud of dust as it pulled up to the farmhouse. "Looks like you've got company," his grandfather observed with a slight smile. "That young lady has been checking on you pretty regular." Sarah emerged from the car carrying a manila envelope and wearing the kind of serious expression that Marcus had learned meant official business. But she also seemed excited about something, which was unusual for her typically professional demeanor. "Good afternoon, Mr. Thompson," she addressed Marcus's grandfather respectfully before turning to Marcus. "I have some news I think you'll want to hear, and some documents that require your attention." They moved to the front porch where Marcus's grandfather served sweet tea while Sarah opened her briefcase. The envelope she had been carrying contained official letterhead from the Department of Justice, along with several other government seals that Marcus didn't immediately recognize. "First," Sarah said, "I want you to know that Dr. Jennifer Walsh and all 22 other hostages have made full recoveries. Dr. Walsh specifically asked me to deliver her personal thanks to you. She said that watching you eliminate the immediate threat to those 3 hostages was the moment she knew they were all going to survive." Marcus felt a warm sense of satisfaction at this news. He had wondered about the people he had helped save, particularly Dr. Walsh, who had shown such courage and leadership during the crisis. "But that's not the main reason I'm here," Sarah continued, pulling out an ornate document with gold lettering. "The Attorney General has recommended you for the Medal for Valor, the highest civilian decoration for courage in the face of danger. The ceremony will be in Washington next month." Marcus stared at the official document, feeling overwhelmed. He had never expected recognition for doing what he considered his duty. His grandfather leaned over to read the citation, which described in formal language the precise shooting that had saved lives and enabled the successful rescue operation. "There's more," Sarah said, producing additional paperwork. "The FBI wants to offer you a permanent position as a specialized tactical consultant. You would be based here in Texas, but available for deployment anywhere in the country when situations require your unique skills." This was the opportunity Marcus had dreamed of since his military rejection years earlier. It was a chance to serve his country and protect innocent people using the abilities his grandfather had helped him develop. It wasn't the traditional military career he had originally planned, but it was something even more suited to his particular talents. His grandfather was nodding approvingly as he read through the official documents. "Sounds like they finally figured out what I've known all along, that you were meant for something special. The position would involve extensive training with federal tactical units," Sarah explained. "You'd work with the crisis response team, the hostage rescue team, and sometimes with military special operations when they need civilian expertise. The work would be challenging and sometimes dangerous, but always in service of protecting innocent lives." Marcus felt his heart rate increase with excitement. This was exactly what he had been preparing for his entire life, even when he didn't know it. His military rejection had seemed like the end of his dreams, but it had actually been the beginning of a different and perhaps better path. "I need to think about it," Marcus said carefully. Though he already knew his answer, he wanted to discuss the opportunity with his grandfather, whose wisdom had guided him through every important decision in his life. After Sarah left with promises to return in a week for his decision, Marcus and his grandfather sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in brilliant oranges and reds. The old man was quiet for a long time, which usually meant he was working through something important in his mind. "You know," his grandfather finally said, "when I was in the war, I always wondered if the things I did really mattered in the long run. It's taken me most of my life to understand that what matters isn't the scale of what you do, but the precision and purpose with which you do it." Marcus understood the deeper meaning behind his grandfather's words. The old man was telling him that saving 23 lives was as important as any military victory, that protecting innocent people was the highest form of service regardless of the uniform or organization involved. Those people in that mountain facility didn't need a soldier, his grandfather continued. They needed exactly what you are. Someone with the skill and character to make impossible shots under impossible pressure. Your asthma may have kept you out of the regular military, but it led you to something you're even better suited for. That evening, Marcus called Sarah to accept the position. He would attend the medal ceremony in Washington, then begin the advanced training that would prepare him for even more challenging missions. His rejection from military service had ultimately led him to a role where he could make an even greater difference. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in a ceremonial room in the Department of Justice building, wearing his best suit and feeling slightly overwhelmed by the formality of the occasion. Dr. Walsh was there, having flown in specifically to meet the man who had saved her life and the lives of her colleagues. "I want you to know," she said, shaking Marcus's hand firmly, "that those 23 people you saved are continuing their research on climate change. The work they're doing might help save millions of lives in the future. Your shot that day had impacts you'll probably never fully know about." As the Attorney General presented Marcus with the Medal for Valor, he thought about his grandfather sitting proudly in the audience. The old man had taught him that shooting was about more than just accuracy. It was about patience, judgment, and the moral courage to act when others were depending on you. The medal was beautiful, but Marcus knew the real reward was simpler and more meaningful. 23 innocent people had gone home safely to their families because he had been willing to take the hardest shots of his life when it mattered most. In a world full of uncertainty and danger, he had found his purpose, protecting those who could not protect themselves, one precisely aimed shot at a time. His grandfather had been right all along. Sometimes one good shot really could change everything. And sometimes the path that seemed like a rejection was actually a redirection toward something far more important than anything he could have originally imagined.